All right, let's dig into the Manhattan Project real quick, and then I'll branch off from that. So, the Manhattan Project was a code name for a plan to develop the world's first atomic bomb. It was led by the U.S. with support from Canada, UK. It took place from 1942 to 1946 under the supervision of General Leslie Groves, a U.S. Army lieutenant. The mechanics of actually developing the bomb was left to Robert Oppenheimer. The origins of the project started in 1939 when American intelligence became aware of the dangers of nuclear weapons in the hands of the Nazis. Such a weapon could pose a huge threat to the United States and leave them at Hitler's mercy if he had won the war. He would have no doubt turned his attention westwards if Europe was under his command, as well as east towards Russia, right? So the Manhattan Project was not a conspiracy theory in any way. It's well documented. Documents are widely available. The U.S. had to commission their own project in response to the threat of nuclear weapons by other countries. Because it's been, you know, policy of the United States for hundreds of years to have the largest gun, to act as a deterrent. And it's a policy which has traditionally been very successful. The Manhattan Project is the biggest true conspiracy theory to date. It was reported after it can be deemed officially true after it was declassified and the official records published. It was employing about 130,000 people. It spawned many industrial and research industries and spin off industries. Entire towns were constructed in secret government supervision. The research took place in Canada, the UK, and the US. The primary research sites for the project were the Hanford site, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It's the sheer scope of the project that leads most to deny the existence of the Manhattan Project, not just the unlikelihood of the plot itself. Many people did speak out about the Manhattan Project. The very fact that it is being discussed right now indicates that it was not kept secret at all. And the Department of Energy has actually posted all accounts online with the official document history of the Manhattan Project. The last section in the document, referring to intelligence and security, states that since September 1943, investigations were conducted of more than 1,500 loose talks or leakage of information cases. And corrective action was taken in more than 1,200 violations of procedures in handling classified material. 7,000 people lived in a town that was built in New Mexico called Los Alamos. For every true conspiracy theory, though, there's a bunch of fake theories or offshoots. Several people believe that a different Manhattan Project relating to an underground bunker in Central Park was paid for by the federal government to house the first underground governmental facility. This facility was used to house a number of famous people over the years. Tsar Nicholas II is held to have lived and died in the underground facility after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. Allegedly, he had asked President Wilson for assistance. Tsar and his family were the first to live in the underground facility, according to this conspiracy theory. Adolf Hitler is also claimed to have lived there after his escape from the U.S. before the end of the war. Hitler contacted President Roosevelt. He would give Roosevelt the atomic bomb the Nazis have been developing and all scientific research and the hiding places of all of his top scientists if he gained political asylum in the U.S. Come on, right? Or the fact that they think that aliens found in Roswell, New Mexico, were nursed back to health and lived in the Manhattan Project. They happily lived in their home under Central Park until their death. In return for the assistance, they gave many technologies to the U.S., including Teflon, stealth plane technology, and radar. Why they had this technology but didn't have the capability of traveling back home to where they, from where they came from, the world may never know. So there's no doubt that there was an official documented project to develop an atomic bomb by the U.S., and its existence was kept a secret, but without much success. This is simple, reasonable, natural, and logical. There was a threat. The U.S. needed to create a deterrent, and it had to be kept a secret for good reason. It would be naive to imagine otherwise. The atomic bomb was used in Hiroshima in response to the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. The side conspiracies of the Manhattan Project in Manhattan with the underground bunker is absurd. But you know what's not absurd? Is our favorite YouTuber, Denise Matow. Her father worked at the Los Alamos, New Mexico facility and had worked on the atomic bomb. He was for several years a tool and die maker on the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos, New Mexico. He signed up for the project late during World War II and lived several years away from his wife and two young daughters. In 1999, he took a trip with his wife Pauline to Los Alamos and toured the exhibits and museums about U.S. attempts on the 1940s to create an atomic bomb. At one time of the trip, he was one of the few remaining men alive who worked on the site. His name was James Matow. Now, James Matow was also a member of the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks and a former member of the Webster Elks Lodge and a lifetime member of the Benevolent Protective Order of the Elks in Bellows Falls. That's Vermont, by the way. Now, I don't know what everyone knows about the Elks Lodges, but the Elks Lodges revolutionized blackface, basically. So it doesn't really come as any galloping shock to me why Denise Matow is a racist. Because Americans seen blackface for the first time in a minstrel show in New York. White performers covered their face with shoe polish or burnt cork to mimic African slaves. The show is characterized slaves as lazy, stupid, criminal, hypersexual, among other offensive stereotypes. After the Civil War, blackface performances only increased, establishing stereotypes that had long-lasting effects on a race of people who are much greater than the color of their skin. Ending blackface is a step towards solving other issues of racism because of how ingrained the practice is in the history of this country. The Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks was founded in 1868. The Elks Club, also known as the Burnt Cork Brotherhood, was formed by minstrel performers by the 1960s presidents FDR, Harry Truman, JFK supported the Brotherhood because blackface was so widely accepted all throughout all of the 20th and into the early 21st century. Nobody deemed it deplorable except the people that were affected by it. And there's pictures. Just go into Google and type in Elk Lodge blackface, and you'll see hundreds of pictures of different lodges with people doing these shows. And it's sick. It's twisted. It's really fucked up. So when Denise Matow says, I touched that tar baby or whatever, she's probably fundamentally racist. There's been hundreds of lawsuits against the elk lodges, discrimination lawsuits. It started out as a whites only club in the 1970s, I believe. They started letting black people in, but like in minuscule amounts. There's even cases all the way up to like 2008 where African American people were rejected and not allowed to be members of this club. Racial discrimination has been practiced by most fraternal organizations in the U.S. since their inception, and it continues in many of those groups. And it's important, given the ambiguity of fraternal groups. The size of their membership, it was over 1 million people that belonged to the protective order of the Elks. At one point, I think that number is down to like 800,000 now. And though they're non-political fraternal groups, they often aggressively support Americanism, and membership in them is beneficial to those who have political aspirations or people that want to hold office. On occasion, they provide and funnel resources to aid the citizenry for parks in many communities, sponsor participant sport events, and various civic projects. It is doubtful, however, that civic objectives are most important ones for the existence of fraternal groups, even though their members are quick to emphasize their involvement in and betterment of the communities in which they live. So, with the exception, surveys of secret fraternal groups, few scholars have paid much attention to these organizations. This neglect is surprising since some fraternal groups have been rather prominent in the United States for over 200 years. The Elks have been rather prominent for 170 something years, and they've been fundamentally racist the entire time. How come Denise doesn't talk about that? How come she doesn't talk about? Oh, in 1992, she had a television show on Warner Cable. It's a new series produced by Denise Matow. Informal encounters with artists, including a look at the Pittsfield Art League Gallery. It's produced by the Dalton Community Cable Association. It's called Fresh Video. Why don't you talk about that? That's actually a really cool thing. Why doesn't she talk about the time where she went to the city hall meeting, where you can call this the Great Skate Debate of 1988, where Chief William Walsh wanted roller skates, scooters, or any athletic games on sidewalks, streets, or parking lots in the heart of the downtown area banned. And Denise Matow slapped her fat ass to the microphone and came before the meeting and asked if the voters really wanted to live in a town where it's illegal to roller skate. She said that it's a free country and children should be taught to ride responsibly, not ordered to surrender their wheels. Good on you, Denise Matzau. That's a good thing. She stood up for the kids. Why doesn't Denise Matzau talk about when she was 43 years old and disrupted a Take Back the Night rally and sentenced to 100 hours of community service after a jury convicted her of disorderly conduct at that rally for pushing a police officer during the rally's final moments. Testimony showed that on September 7th, 1995, Denise Matzau confronted marchers on North Street and yelled that they were being brainwashed by the Women's Services Center. Mathau was arrested after she pushed Sergeant Terrence Donnelly as she tried to make her way to the open microphone portion of the rally as it neared its conclusion in the front of the Superior Court building. Jackie Wong testified that she had asked Donnelly to arrest Mathau about an hour before when Mathau confronted the marchers and loudly likened their march to Nazism. She was kind of scary in her intensity, Wong said. She was very out of control, in your face screaming. Wong said that Mathau didn't appear to pose a physical threat, but added that she was concerned for the emotional well being of the marchers, many of whom had suffered some form of violent abuse. Wong and other peacekeepers persuaded the marchers not to engage or encourage Mathau. And Officer Thomas Barber, whose attention was drawn to the confrontation, approached Mathau, entering the throng of marchers. At one point, Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Tyne said Mathau approached the mother and sister of a high school student murdered in November 1994 and proclaimed that they had been brainwashed. Donnelly told Wong at that point that he couldn't arrest Mathau because she had a right to express her opinion. On the witness stand, Denise Mathau, an artist, testified that she had heard the marchers chanting as they proceeded up North Street. She said she returned to her Union Street apartment and attempted to continue working, but the chants and wails of the marchers completely distracted her, so she went out back on North Street to see what was going on and to have a talk with them. She said her purpose was to try to get some of the marchers to question the conditioning they were allowing themselves to undergo by the Women's Services Center. Going beyond the scope of question posed, Mehta said that the march was a training ground for violence, not a protest against violence directed at women. They were being formed into a tool to perform violence, she said. Judge Peter Rutherford ordered the jurors to disregard that remark. Mehta denied that she had yelled in other people's faces or argued with members of the Hopkins family. In the closing argument, her defense attorney told the jurors that she attended the rally to express her political opinion. She felt there was another side to the issue and she needed to speak up in the midst of people who believed differently than she did. You call it disorderly, I call it courage. This case isn't about her speaking, it's about her conduct, is what the prosecutor said. It wasn't until Mattow pushed Donnelly in front of the courthouse that she was led away in handcuffs. Judge Rutherford said that this was Mattow's fifth conviction for disorderly conduct and warned her that she risked incarceration if she continued to behave in this fashion. He imposed her with a maximum fine of $200, with a $50 cert fine and a $35 in court costs. He said that that would impose on Mattow's life if she was on a limited income. He then ordered her to perform 100 hours of community service within 60 days. Trial was scheduled to begin on Friday, but Rutherford declared mistrial after a juror told the court officer that believed she belatedly recognized the defense witness, Valerie Singer, as a woman with whom she'd had a previous confrontation. Second juror told Rutherford during individual questioning that she overheard this conversation and she wouldn't say she would be able to accept Sanger's testimony as credible. After sentencing, Mattow criticized Rutherford's decision not to allow into evidence a videotape that was made for later broadcast on the public access channel 5 times. Actually, there's a sixth one, a disorderly conduct too, that I don't have much information on. But 6 times arrested with disorderly conduct. That was one of the cases. How about you talk about the time, Denise, when you removed your daughter from the 6th grade at school because you wanted to criticize the district on its policies regarding field trips. Denise Mattow was required by law to teach her daughter at home, according to district superintendent Mattow herself. This is pretty awesome, though. This is really cool. The committee approved a basic 6th grade course load that Denise Mattow herself had developed using guidelines provided by the state's Department of Education. Now, that is badass, I gotta say. That's really cool. Several school committee members, in fact, complimented Denise for her proposed curriculum. That's really cool. Um, the reason why she took her out of school and made that curriculum is because she was not in favor of a disorganized approach to education and cited a proposed overnight field trip to Gloucester for whale watching as an example. She said that the proposed cost of $121 was extravagant and including stops at several expensive restaurants for meals. She said that she found discrepancies in prices for certain segments of the trip when she called the bus company for confirmation of the trip. Mattow said that she told the teacher sponsoring the trip that $121 was too expensive for her. And how could anyone pay for that? The arrangement was also unacceptable because it did not teach children that they have to work for things. Nothing in life is free, and we shouldn't teach our children that. She said that her daughter was sold the trip by the teacher, who didn't even consult Denise. Denise deemed the teacher's failure to consult her dangerous and manipulative, kind of like Denise herself. Ironically, the whale watching trip was canceled because the teacher who was chaperoning the trip and had volunteered her time to take the kids on this trip, criticized by Mattow and another parent. So why doesn't she do a show about that? Or she could do a show about this one, where she was found guilty of being a disorderly person and placed on probation for 1 year. That was on August 4th, 1989. How about when she was running for the Housing Authority in 1987? Denise Mantow, 33 at the time, was registered as an independent. She was a self employed artist. When she was seeking the office, she said, out of concern about the lack of affordable housing in Great Barrington. I seek a reasonable awareness of tenants' needs by landlords, perhaps promote some rent control and work with community groups to make housing available to families. including single parent families. I would promote greater public awareness of the impact of the housing crisis on children, and I would seek ways to provide housing and working families before they sink to relying on public assistance. Denise wasn't always crazy. And you know what? When she's on, she could bring a show. But when she's talking nonsense that she don't know nothing about, and if she wants to keep on making up lies about me, then I'll keep telling the truth about her. Now, her daughter seemed like a wonderful person. Um, she was a member of the Sunlight and Shadows dance. It's a group of writers. They were all age 13 to 21, and they would all meet at the community center on like Monday nights, and poetry would happen. And Sojourner Jackson, Faith Jackson, who was 17 at the time. This was in 1994. She had just graduated high school, and she had been with the group since it started. Um, but they, organized an informal get together for writers and artists at Write in Style. It's a store in Lenox in November of 1993. Jackson said that she had been writing as far back as she could remember. When she was little, before she was really good at physically writing, she would come up with stories and poems, and her mom would write them down in a journal that they had. It's one of her memories that she had at Denise writing her stories down, which is pretty awesome. I have nothing bad to say about Denise. I honestly don't. I don't know why she slanders me. I don't know if it's because she has nothing better to do. Then again, she does it to everybody. I mean, she thinks I blew up something in Massachusetts, what she said on her show earlier. Denise, I haven't been in Massachusetts since 2004. So I don't know what I was blowing up in the 1960s, 1970s when I was born in 1990. I don't know. That's something for you to figure out. How 20 years before I was born, I was blowing shit up. Or how I'm responsible for Sojourner Faith Matthew's death in 2011 when I haven't been in Massachusetts since 2004. How about that one? Or how I'm blowing up docks or some bullshit in Corpus Christi when I've never been in Corpus Christi a day in my life. I supposedly know Dave Acton and George Webb, and I've never even talked to them. I've talked to Dave Acton one time. Now you'd think that I talked to Monograph and Clovis. I've never once talked to Monograph, and Clovis and I have not talked in months. Clovis and I are not really getting along right now, and we probably won't ever speak again. But I figured I'd tell some truth about you since you came on here on this platform and ran your mouth and slandered me. Not one thing you said was true, and you know it. You just make shit up as you go along. This is part one. I have a lot more I can go through, but this is part one. I'm not going to spend all night talking about Denise myself. I just figured I'd give her a piece of what I know about her.